Thanks for tuning in to more New England Patriots coverage on the Our-Lads Football Network. This is Pat's Probe with Evan Lazar of CLNSmedia.com, and you can also check him out at Patriots Press Pass on YouTube. Evan, good to have you back again.
Good to have you, Greg. Yeah, good to be here, I should say. You always have me, so it's good to be here.
There's no show without you, so...
Yeah, right. Oh, thanks. I appreciate
There's
that.
There's a channel without you, but not a New England Patriots show. So
I appreciate that. Yes, another week.
And you had a lot of... you chest was out talking about the Buffalo Bills last week, and so I decided let's get Ryan Talbot on from NYUp.com. New York Upstate also works there, of course, and Ryan's been on this channel for the last few years covering the Buffalo Bills. And Ryan, the Bills get a chance at revenge just a couple of weeks after losing a really tough one, which I know the Buffalo Bills fans believe that the weather had everything to do with it.
Yeah, listen, considering how many things have gone wrong for the team this year, whether it's some brutal losses like the game against Jacksonville or those one-score games where the Bills are so good 1 year ago and this year they can't win any of them seemingly, it's almost a shock to see with 3 weeks to go they have the ability to take back control of the AFC East. So I think Bills fans are pretty happy with this opportunity. We'll see what happens on Sunday, just because I think both teams right now are kind of getting hit a little bit with players getting added to the reserve COVID list. There's some injury concerns. And obviously, though, the one good thing for the Bills is there's not going to be 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts. So you are going to see them be able to throw the ball a little bit more and Josh Allen be able to sling that ball around.
Evan, you're happy about that, right? That the weather's going to be equal and you want a fair playing field.
I do want to see what the Patriots do in terms of a fair playing field, or a more fair playing field, I should say, than the last time out. Now, we were just talking about this before we hit record. The game script for New England to be able to run the ball as much as they did in the first matchup was played right into the Patriots' hands, right? They wanted to play that ground and pound, ugly, grinded out type of football game against Buffalo, and that's their script. That's the way that they want to play football in general, and especially as everybody does want to play from ahead. It is a big thing for New England as well. So this time around, you can't imagine, especially when you play a divisional opponent so close together, it feels like these two games could be polar opposites of one another. And I'm not saying it's going to be 40 to 45 shootout or anything like that, but just in terms of the way the game flows and the opportunities that present themselves. And you also got to think from Buffalo's perspective, and maybe it will come down to as simply as, you can't stop us. We're going to run the football and we're going to outmuscle you and it's not going to matter. But the Bills are going to be much better prepared, you would think, for some of the run game wrinkles that the Patriots threw at Buffalo the first time around. So I am fascinated to see how this game, from a stylistic perspective, declares, right? Who has the upper hand in terms of setting the game script and setting the momentum of the game early on in the first quarter.
Ryan, what did you get out of because McDermott had some kind of choice words or specific, I don't know if he was being vague. It sure sounded like it from the outside perspective. We weren't really sure what he was meaning when Brian Daboll and the offensive strategy came up. So what was going on here? Was there frustration? Was it collective? Was it pointing fingers? What happened to Buffalo in that game against New England that frustrated or disappointed McDermott?
There's a laundry list of things that frustrated McDermott in that game. Listen, Evan just said that the Bills in an ideal world would have gone out to a lead, put some pressure on them, especially in those conditions, knowing that Mac Jones doesn't have the type of arm that Josh Allen has. And the Bills had really good field position early in that game, their first few drives, and they couldn't amount that to anything. The first drive stalled out, 3 and out. Then you had Matt Breida fumble the ball when they were kind of driving. They had their first down there. So the Bills had some opportunities in that game. They drove late in the game, but they were playing into the wind. Tyler Bass, who's, a very reliable kicker, missed one because of the wind gusts. And then when they had the ball back late in the game, had he made that first field goal, another one would have won it. So little things like that added up in the game. But in the red zone, especially in terms of this offense, I think that's where Sean McDermott really came away frustrated. He had a 1st and goal from the 6. You try running Zach Moss, who's been very ineffective this year when he has played. He's been inactive quite a bit as well. Then Josh Allen gets sacked on second down, and all of a sudden you go from a first and goal from the 6 where you feel pretty confident about that to a third and forever.
Sure.
And that pretty much ended the game there. So there was a lot that I think frustrated him. The fact that they gave up so many yards on the ground, the fact that they knew that the Patriots were going to be one-dimensional in that game. And mind you, while they were better against the run, especially late in that game, they were still the Patriots, that is, able to get that lead early and hold on to that lead throughout the game.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the running situation, because again, statistically, an outsider is going to look here. And we know since Allen's been there, it's been mostly a passing offensive team. You don't have to be, a genius to figure that out. But statistically, when you take a look and you see Devin Singletary's at 4.7 an attempt on average, and even Breida on just 26 carries is 4.8. You mentioned Moss is struggling. But if those two guys, especially Singletary, is close to 5 a carry, are those numbers skewed? Or is it just they won't run the football enough, and they should run it more if the average is the way it is? Tell the outsider, explain to us why they don't run it more and whether they should run it more.
No, I mean, the numbers are a little bit skewed. Listen, Devin Singletary is a fine back. I think he can be a really good complementary back in an offense, but the Bills don't have that guy, that one player that you really want to give the ball to 20 plus times per game. They did it with Singletary this past week. He ended up with 80 plus yards and a score, including the opening score of the game, which was great. But he lacks that extra gear. There's things he does well with the vision aspect of it, but he's limited, I guess, is the best way of saying what he can do. And then hurting matters even more is this offensive line, even when they're completely healthy, and they haven't been healthy in quite some time in terms of having their ideal 5 guys out there, they struggle in terms of the run blocking aspect of it. We were talking again before we hit record here. We don't know the status of Dean Dawkins going into this game. John Feliciano was added to the reserve COVID list the day of the Panthers game last week, and he was in the ER. So it's unknown whether, how he's going to be doing. He says he's feeling better now, but that's a mystery. So there's 2 of the linemen that you envisioned, obviously, starting all year for your team. Feliciano hasn't played offense since Halloween for Buffalo, and then obviously Dawkins has had an up and down year, but it's better than the alternatives, flipping Spencer Brown back from right tackle to left tackle, a position where he really had very little experience, and you saw that with him getting penalized a handful of times against Carolina. It means Cody Ford's out there on the field, who's been more down than up throughout his entire stint in Buffalo. So, there's a lot of things in flux right now, but the offensive line play plays a big role as well into why the Bills don't run the ball as much as they would probably maybe like to. But it's also the talent in the running back room. They're missing a true top back.
What do you want to know about the Bills, Evan?
Well, I think the fascinating thing for me with Josh Allen and the way that they've run this offense stylistically is to me at least, and I just watched the tape against Carolina as well, and you look at the box score, and although he only threw for 210 yards, 3 touchdowns, I mean, it's not a terrible box score for Josh Allen, but then you look at the actual tape, and he had some trouble in the traditional drop back passing game against Carolina. So right now, their offense seems predicated on optionality, play action, kind of things that we didn't necessarily see out of that offense last year. Last year, their drop back passing game was one of the best in the league. They could spread you out and throw the ball pretty much anywhere they wanted. Now it feels disjointed. Josh Allen feels a little skittish behind the offensive line that's clearly not playing very well. And I thought against the Patriots, there were some elements of that as well. The second half against Tampa Bay, he was great. And so that I thought, oh, well, he kind of figured it out and Josh Allen's back sort of thing. But then last week against Carolina, still more of the same hesitancy, not taking the underneath stuff, bailing on the pocket when it really doesn't seem like there's that much pressure in his face. What is your read on Josh Allen right now? And do you feel like, I don't think it's him, right? I mean, he's still as talented as ever, but how do they get the timing and the rhythm of the passing game back in order?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, right now there's a lot of things wrong with this team. Allen's still dealing with a foot sprain. He wasn't on the injury list for that Carolina game, but he clearly wasn't 100%. Part of what makes him dangerous is the ability that he can take off and run, whether it's design plays, whether it's just scrambling. He ran one time in that game in terms of really taking off, going downfield, gained 26 yards. But going to the Panthers game, the offensive line really was not holding up early in the game. Brian Burns was wreaking havoc. They have a very talented young pass rush trio, actually. They were top 10 going into that game with 32 sacks. The pass defense was really good. So I think there was this feeling out period. Now, as the game went on, the offensive line got a little bit better, and Josh Allen got a little bit better. The touchdown throw to Gabriel Davis was something where when you watched the first one, you said, there's only maybe 3 quarterbacks that can make that throw, fire it in between the coverage. So the arm talent's still there, but you're right. He's been a little bit more skittish this year. He's bailing out of the pocket, like you mentioned. And I think it's a variety of factors. One, last year, Stephon Diggs could get open at will the way teams were playing against him. This year, they are making it a focal point to lock him down to make sure that he is their number one guy. And obviously, Belichick's going to do the same thing on Sunday. That's going to be their main focal point there. Early in the season, I think that they thought Emmanuel Sanders was going to be an upgrade at wide receiver number 2. And while there's a lot that he brings to this team from a leadership perspective on field play, I think that they kind of missed the boat from not giving Gabriel Davis a bigger role early in the year. And you're starting to see that chemistry come back between the two of them. He had 7 touchdowns as a rookie. He's at 6 right now, despite having a smaller role. So this late in the season, though, they're still trying to figure out their best pieces. And in the case of Sanders, he was hurt, so it kind of opened the door for Gabriel Davis. The emergence of Dawson Knox, it's not a bad thing, but I think that also complicated things in the passing game, where last year you knew it was 1A was Stephon Diggs, 1B was Cole Beasley, and then everyone else is kind of jumbled into that mix of who else could be targeted. Now you almost have too many mouths to feed. And then when it comes to the play calling, I think Brian Daboll is still a very talented offensive coordinator, but I think that he's also kind of maybe tried to overcomplicate things in the red zone this year, where they were pretty solid 1 year ago. This year, they've been very hit and miss. Some games they're on, other games, it's why they ended up losing to teams like Jacksonville and why they couldn't pull out these 1-score games late against some really good competition later in the year. So there's a variety of reasons why the Bills are at where they're at right now, but you're right. It's not Allen. Allen is still, on pace with the numbers that he had 1 year ago when people were talking about him as a legit MVP candidate for years to come.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see how this offense is transformed. Not that the RPOs was a pretty big part of their offense last year, but now it feels like the zone read RPO elements and the bootleg actions are their most consistent schemes. And when they spread it out, which was so effective for them in 2020, that's when their offense gets helter-skelter, is when they actually go 4 or 5 wide and put Allen in the gun and put all their receivers out there, which is, I would think, going into the year, what they thought was going to be the foundation of their offense was Josh Allen with Diggs and Beasley and Sanders and Knox and everybody out there. And you try to cover all of us. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about just offensively was cover 2. It seems like that's the big scheme. I'm sure you guys have asked the coaches about it 100 times. I find it a little bit weird that Sean McDermott's a big cover 2 guy himself and a big quarters guy too. So you would think he would know how to scheme up against his own type of system, but they feel like the 2 deep stuff has really given them a lot of problems as well.
Yeah. And, I think that's maybe it's the big arm quarterback. Maybe it's that mentality, but it's the same thing with Mahomes that we've seen with Allen. It's almost like they're too stubborn to take the short passing game and to march down the field. Well, I have this arm talent, I can squeeze it in there. Or maybe stubborn isn't the right word. Or maybe it's just the fact that the Bills can't get out of their own way this year, because there's been many drives where they've been marching up and down the field, and then there's a holding penalty against one of their offensive linemen, or there's some kind of boneheaded play where they have to move backwards. And that's all it takes to really stall these drives out. It doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. If you keep putting them into 2nd and 20 scenarios or 3rd and longs, they're not always going to convert those. So it's been a lot of different factors, but I agree with you. You would think that the Bills would have that blueprint. And there's been games where I've said that and I said, okay, they're starting to figure it out against the cover two. The Jacksonville game comes to mind. I thought the Bills had that figured out late in that game, but then they just kept stalling out penalties and turnovers and just minor mistakes, shooting themselves in the foot. That's kind of been one of the major themes of this season is they can't get out of their own way, let alone then stopping the opponent.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating foil with Mac Jones here in New England because the Patriots, and even with Brady before that, they want to be an efficient offense, right? So if the 5-yard check down is there, then they beg Mac Jones to take it. They're like, take it all day long. We'll go 6-7 yards down the field at a time. We'll go on 10, 11 play drives and we'll score touchdowns that way. We don't need the 60-yard play. But then you have quarterbacks like you said, like Allen and Mahomes and Herbert and these guys that want to push the ball down the field, and they do feel like they just don't have the patience to kind of sit there and just dink and dunk their way down. And it's figured out a little bit, at least all of these offenses to a degree. And the only one that seems to really have the answer to it, I guess, is probably Tampa Bay because they can run the ball with Fournette and get you out of too high that way. I wanted to ask you about the defense, though, as well, and just how you've seen the Bills defense respond after Tre'Davious White's injury and kind of adjust without Tre'Davious White back there.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, the benefit for the Bills is they have one of the top safety duos in this league in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And when you have that, that makes life easier. When you have Taron Johnson, one of the best nickel cornerbacks in the game, it makes life easier. But they really haven't necessarily been challenged as much as I thought they would have been on the outside with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. Now, mind you, the first game was the Patriots game, 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gust. There was no way they were going to get tested in that game. Against Brady, I thought that Dane Jackson actually held up fairly well. I thought he had two pass breakups in the game, one that he should have intercepted. He jumped the route, and then the ball even landed on him as he went to the ground. He just couldn't haul that in. So I thought that he played pretty solid football in that game too. Levi Wallace is what he is. I think he's by Bills fans, he's a little bit underrated. They've been trying to replace this guy, the fan base that is, for quite a few years now. They're like, oh, we've already seen this guy. We know his limitations. Well, when you had an all-pro on the opposite side, of course, the other one's going to get targeted a lot. I think Levi's a fine number 2, but he's been upgraded into this cornerback 1 role now. Last week, you're not going to be challenged by Cam Newton at this point in his career as a pure passer. There's certain routes he can throw accurately, but you saw when he had DJ Moore running wide open down the field, he didn't have the arm strength to get it to him. So it's going to be interesting now against Mac Jones, who doesn't have the arm strength of a Josh Allen, but you're right, he's efficient. He's very accurate in that short intermediate game. So I'm going to be interested to see how Jackson and Levi Wallace specifically hold up, because you know that, like I said, Hyde, Poyer, Taron Johnson, there's no concerns there about their play and what they're going to do. How much can they help, though, those young guys is going to be the main thing that I'll be watching for on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm really interested because, you know, the Colts, their whole game plan, they came out and said it during the week before Bobby Okereke, their linebacker, said, we're going to put the game in Mac Jones's hands and see what the kid is made of. Now, it worked for 3 quarters. Mac figured it out a little bit in the 4th, and Indy ended up having that big run by Taylor that put the game on ice. But I would assume that the Bills are probably going to come in with a very similar mindset of whenever the Patriots get down in the game, and this is a fair criticism right now of the team, the only game the Patriots have successfully completed a comeback in is against Houston, and that's the Texans. It's not a good team so far. So Tampa Bay got ahead of them. Dallas got ahead of them. Obviously, the Indianapolis got ahead. Miami, New Orleans, you know, those are their 5 losses, all 5 of them trying to come from behind. But can the Bills do it? You know, can the Bills get the game to be one-dimensional and put it all on Mac Jones's shoulders? You know, that's going to be the game plan, I would think. But it's another question of if you can actually execute that.
Yeah, 100%. And I already mentioned the offensive line, the fact that they might be without Deion Dawkins again. They might be without John Feliciano. So what's that going to look like? The options in terms of if they wanted to keep Spencer Brown at right tackle are not appealing. You're talking Bobby Hart. You're talking Tommy Doyle as options, and neither of those guys you want starting 4 quarters at left tackle. So you would think that if Dawkins cannot go, it's Spencer Brown flip back over there again. And then a lot of the reserve players that we've already seen this year, like Butker at left guard and Cody Ford at right guard, Darrell Williams at right tackle, and Morse at center. So, one, that's a benefit to the Patriots in terms of getting after the quarterback. They have Judon and some very talented players that can get after the quarterback there. Wide receiver Cole Beasley was just added to the reserve COVID list right before we started shooting here today. He's unvaccinated. He tested positive, so he's out for 10 days. There's no chance for him coming back for this game. Emmanuel Sanders was listed as week to week going into last week, so we don't know where he's at right now either, because he is a pretty solid player out of the slot. He could pretty much step right in for Cole Beasley if he is ready to go, but that's unknown. So maybe it's Isaiah McKenzie, who was in the doghouse just a few weeks ago, getting a bigger role on offense, which isn't the worst thing, because you were talking about what was working last year. And last year, they were moving him around a lot, putting him in motion pre-snap. Yeah. Now, mind you, I think the Bills pretty much know what they're seeing out of defenses this year, and that was part of putting him in motion so much. But it doesn't hurt to get a guy like that out there on the field a little bit more, where he can be used as a slot receiver. You can give him some carries. And he can hurt you in that regard, but we don't know what they're going to see there. And then obviously, though, the good news is Gabriel Davis is on the same page as Allen. Diggs is on the same page, and then you have Dawson Knox, who has really taken that next step as a player. And when I say really, I mean he is just springboarded onto the scene, because I thought just a minor jump this year would be a good thing for him in this Bills offense. He has taken a huge step, seeing a vision specialist in the offseason, being up there for the league lead among tight ends and touchdowns. He's been a major asset to this offense, so he'll be good to go out there as well. But it's going to be a mystery, because we're sitting here on Tuesday. Who's to say how many more players are going to be added from both teams to that COVID reserve list before game time starts? Who's going to come off the list? Because you look at the Patriots side, there's quite a few receivers there. Well, there's one big receiver there, and then two that got banged up in game.
Right.
So you could be talking practice squad guys at receiver.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem right now for the Patriots. And you look at all these situations with COVID, they have some clusters going on the team right now, where you have a couple of linebackers that were put on the COVID list along with Kendrick Bourne yesterday. So although the linebackers that were put on were Harvey Longy and Ronnie Perkins, you worry about Dante Hightower and Juwan Bentley and Kyle Van Noy and all the Jamie Collins and all the guys that are sitting in the same room as Ronnie Perkins and Harvey Longy for the past, 6 months. So you have to, that's the thing I think that's really hurt a lot of teams with the COVID stuff, is that it's these position groups are getting cleared out by COVID, because, well, you're in meeting rooms together, you're in film studies together, and you're all together all the time. And that's what's happening, and that's what it's spreading. I know Bills Mafia is a confident group, to say the least, and they like to give it to us. They put a billboard on Route 1 again, back-to-back fans of the year, or whatever it is, the Fox Sports poll. I gotta think that the Bills fans think the Patriots are beatable. So what is it that the Bills fans are saying about New England right now, about how they're going to beat the Pats on Sunday?
Yeah, well, they're pretty confident that Mac Jones is going to throw the ball more than 3 times. Now, that could be for better or for worse, because they might actually end up getting hurt by him because of that accuracy in the game. We'll kind of wait and see on that, but they know that the weather's not going to be the type of factor that it was a few weeks back, and I think that makes them very confident. But again, that confidence, we haven't seen the Bills necessarily put together 2 great games in quite some time. It was win-loss for quite some time, and then they lost 2 games in a row to the Patriots and the Buccaneers before defeating Carolina. So while the Bills, I think, feel confident about the fact that they can put up points on this defense now that they don't have to worry about the wind gusts and things like that, it's also hard to kind of buy into this offense and sit here and say that they're going to go out and put up high 20s, low 30s against a really good Patriots defense, and that this defense, as strong as they've been all season, minus that Colts game, is going to come in here and just shut down the run. There's a lot of film that they can look at from that game a few weeks ago. Like you mentioned, there's they can sit there and say, okay, gap integrity. We have Latulier back for this game. We have this player that we can, maybe was a little bit banged up that we can use in another role. I believe Klein was put on the reserve COVID list like that day of the game.
Yeah, that was a big one, it seemed. Yeah.
And he's solid against the run. That's one thing that he still does very well. So they're going to have some players back in the mix. So there's definitely some confidence there. But I'm not ready to say that they're overly confident for this matchup because they know the way that the Bills have been so inconsistent this season.
And actually, haven't the Bills over the years played better at Foxborough than Buffalo?
Yeah.
Weird as it may
I mean,
seem.
if you go way back, no, you're right. I mean, they've had some close calls there. Even before last year, there was the game where the Bills went against. I think they had a slight lead at halftime because Allen hit Knox right before half, and it went down at the 1. They scored a touchdown, throwing to an offensive lineman eligible player. If I remember this correctly, it feels like that was the game. They were leading going, in the third quarter. They hit John Brown on a deep ball. So they played some
2019.
Yeah, so they've played some tight ones there, especially since Allen's kind of emerged as their true, number one franchise quarterback. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out on Sunday. And then I think Bills fans, one other thing is, Mac Jones is starting to get more and more experience playing in the cold now where he's at, but they want to see when he actually has to throw the ball a little bit, how he does in those factors. I thought he had a nice game in Tennessee a few weeks ago, though, and we'll see on Sunday. It's going to be interesting.
Patriots fans want to see it too. Trust me. I think that there is. Look, the Colts in that game was in a dome, obviously, but they put it on Mac's shoulders. Did Indianapolis, and he threw 2 picks. In the game. Other than that, I wrote about it today. He made probably 10 to 15 great throws in that game, but 2 interceptions, 1 in the red zone, 1 puts them right in field goal range, cost the Patriots 6 to 10 points, just like that. And that's the difference in the game. So as much as he made some really good throws against Indy, and he did bring them back into a 1-score game late in the fourth quarter, he was a big reason why they were in the hole to begin with. So I think it's something that Patriots fans that's the last frontier. We know that Mac can play from ahead. We know he can manage a game. He can make some really good reads and throws down the field and play well within the system. But when he truly has to put the game on his back and carry the Patriots to a win, can he do that? Because he's going to go up against Allen, and he's going to go up against Mahomes or somebody like that in a playoff game where he's going to have to do that. And so far, he's 0 for 5, essentially, and doing that type of thing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and you just mentioned this will be a great game for him with the playoffs just looming, because both of these teams, I saw the percentages. Obviously, if they win this game, the Patriots are about 99% to win the AFC East. Even if they lose, I think they're about 99% to make the playoffs, I should say, if they win the game, 95% to make the playoffs if they lose. So they need those games. They need to show that what he can do, because you're right. Once you get into the playoffs, you might be seeing a Colts team again. You might be seeing a young combination of like the Bengals, but it doesn't matter who you're going to see. It's going to be the best of the best. And you need that quarterback that can lead you back, because you just never know come playoff time how a team's going to perform and come out there and play.
Yeah. Ryan, lastly, before I let you go, do the Bills, we know White's gone, but if you just look at the Bills talent-wise, Allen's playing, they're pretty healthy, one of the best defenses in the league and all that stuff. Is it just a matter of cleaning up what they have now? And if they do that, they could be the Super Bowl contender that they thought they were in the beginning of the season? Or are you just thinking that it's getting a little too late and you're just you're not seeing that this is going to be the year?
I'm personally not seeing it as the year, because I haven't seen enough consistency from this team. But at the same time, you've seen a lot of teams get hot at the right time. You saw Tampa Bay do that last year. You can go back quite a few years to the year that Baltimore won it all with Flacco, and they got hot at the right time. So that can absolutely happen with any team once you get into the playoffs. So I'm not willing to rule them out for that reason, but I've seen enough from the Bills this year that I'm going to find that hard to believe that they're going to be clicking in all cylinders on offense, that this offensive line is suddenly going to be more competent than they've been all year, and that even on defense, as good as they've been, they have not had any kind of consistent pass rush. That's hurt them a little bit. And come playoff time, that Levi Wallace, Dane Jackson combination that we've talked about, they're going to be really tested against some of the best quarterbacks in this league. And you need a pass rushing games like that.
Ryan, great job as always. Appreciate it. And who knows, maybe we'll get a third matchup in the postseason and we can get you guys together again.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me.
Thanks, Ryan.
Take care, Ryan.
Yep, happy holidays.
All right, you got
guys.
it.
You too.
All right, Ryan Talbot covering the Buffalo Bills for it's nyup.com. and you can see it right there on the ticker. You can follow him at Ryan Talbot Bills. So, yeah, it's amazing when you take a look at this, Evan. Greg Rousseau is second in sacks with 3. And actually, Rousseau has been one of their better defensive linemen this season. Addison leads the team with 4 sacks. I can't believe Jerry Hughes has a sack and a half.
Yeah, it's funny because they're a very good pressure team, but they're not a very good sack team, right? So they're right up there at the top of the league in pressure rate and hurry rate and all that kind of stuff from the advanced metrics folks. But in terms of just raw sack totals, they don't necessarily sack the quarterback a ton. But I thought it was really interesting talking to Ryan because I know Bills Mafia. I know they think the last time around the Patriots won the game because of the wind, and that's the only reason why they were able to win the football game. But it does sound from a more objective reporter, side that this Bills team has got a lot of flaws this year and a lot more flaws than what they had this time a year ago. Now, the Patriots are not a perfect team either. They certainly have a lot of flaws too, but I was not surprised from Ryan to hear that, but surprised about how much discourse there is in Buffalo right now about the flaws of their football team and about how inconsistent that they have been, especially on offense. So I'm really interested to see from this matchup what Bills team they get. What Bills team comes out and plays this game on Sunday against the Patriots, and similarly what Patriots team plays, because the team that played for 3 quarters against the Colts last Saturday night looked like a much different team than the team that we had talked about from the 2 months previous during the 7-game win streak, from a energy standpoint, an execution standpoint, attention to detail, getting punts blocked, penalties, turnovers. I mean, it was an ugly affair against the Colts for 3 quarters, basically, in that game. So,
isn't that interesting though, that it comes after the bye? It comes after the hot run. This is what happens. This is why people always talk about, the bye comes at the right time. Well, sometimes the bye comes at the worst time, and that probably is what happens. But like you said, we have to see on Sunday. Is that just the beginning of something that's going to creep up these last several games, or was that just what happens when a hot team comes off of a bye?
Yeah, I think the execution part of it in terms of fundamentals, right? Penalties, technique in the punt block, missing the block on the punt team, Mac Jones getting called for delay a game. I think those things were probably a result of maybe a little bit of rust, a little bit of just not having the same amount of energy, that same momentum that you had, because you had that. So they had built up so much energy and momentum in the building from the 7-game winning streak, and you have the bye week. Everybody disperses for 4 or 5 days, and then they come back, and it's just the energy and the juju and the juices are just not quite flowing the same way. So I think some of that had to do with that. The other thing I would say, and the Patriots players after that game, they didn't directly say this, but you could kind of read between the lines. They had a 2-4 mindset during the 7-game win streak. The taste of 2-4 was in their mouths, and they remembered the losing, and they didn't want to go back there. And then you have 2 months pass by, the bye passes by, and I think that they needed a little bit, you hope, at least, that this is a little bit of a wake-up call, right? That you realize you're not good enough to just go through the motions and just show up and be able to blow doors off of every opponent because you're just the 07 Patriots and you have so much talent that it doesn't matter how you practice and it doesn't matter how much energy you put into it and how much effort you put into it. The Patriots are not there yet. They're not good enough yet to be able to get away with those types of things, to be getting away with cutting corners. So hopefully this woke them up a little bit, but this matchup, like I said to Ryan, is really one that concerns me because you can't possibly have the game go the same exact way twice. It's not going to go the same exact way twice. So there's going to be adversity. There's going to be things that the Patriots are going to have to do that are a little bit outside their comfort zone compared to the last time when they played Buffalo. So we'll see. We'll see if this Patriots team is ready to right now so far, and it's nothing against the Pats because when they're on and when they played their game, they are a very, very difficult team to beat. But so far, they've only won games outside of that Houston game, which doesn't really count because it's the Texans. They have not won a game with their B game. They have not won a game that hasn't gone to script exactly how they want it to go. Play from ahead, play complementary football, play clean football, no penalties, no turnovers, no punt blocks, no craziness like that. Run the football offensively, effectively, stay ahead of the chains. Don't put too much on Mac Jones. Those types of things. That's how they've won all 9 of their games so far this year. So when that doesn't happen, and it's not all perfect and it's not all sunshines and rainbows, can this team still win a football game? So far, they're 0 for 5 in that scenario. So we'll see what happens if Buffalo puts some force on them, put some pressure on them to play like that.
Now, back, we didn't really talk about the Colt game yet. So a couple of things from the Colt game. First of all, the decision with 9 minutes to go, whatever, to kick the field goal. When the decision came out, were you surprised?
No, not surprised even the slightest, because this is Bill Belichick all year long. He is a conservative decision maker. All of the metrics that you look at in terms of fourth down decision making, the Patriots, it's the Bucs, and the Seahawks, which just so happens to be the 3 oldest head coaches, I believe, in the NFL. I don't know if Bruce Arians, I know Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll are the 2 oldest coaches in the league. I think Bruce Arians might be number 3, but I'd have to look it up and see. 3 of the oldest coaches in the league, and it's not a mistake that those guys are on one end of the spectrum and the Brandon Staleys of the world are on the other side of the spectrum as the young, math-forward thinking, analytic type of people. So I think when you look at the field goal decision for Belichick, and I actually bought his explanation after on Monday morning, he gave a really good explanation about why he kicked there. And his adage was, he felt like the Patriots offense was going to get 2 more possessions in the game. And in 2 more possessions, you could theoretically score the 10-point gap that the Patriots had in the game at that point. What he also mentioned was that the Patriots and the Colts were obviously playing in a dome, and you have a really good kicker in Nick Folk. And so you think we get a touchdown, we make it 20-17, then we get into Folk's field goal range in a dome. He's going to make anything inside of 50 yards, and we'll go to overtime. And I can sort of buy that explanation. If there was 5 minutes left, then kicking the field goal there is absolutely lunacy. Yeah. And Belichick said that. He said that if there was less time, I would have went for it. But because there was still 9 minutes left, they felt like they still had 2 more possessions offensively to get the 10 points that they needed to get. And as it turned out, they did get 2 more possessions. It just happens that one of them came after Jonathan Taylor ran for 70 yards to the end zone. So if the defense had stopped the Colts on that drive, they would have gotten the ball back at 20-17 with about 2 minutes to go, and they would have had the exact same scenario that Belichick envisioned.
His press conference after the game.
Yeah.
We've seen this 100 times. That's about how many times he's lost. So, was it, and they've lost before this year. So was it his worst post-game press conference of the season?
Of the season, certainly. No doubt about it. I think it was twofold. One, he felt, and rightfully so, that the players were not ready to play. And when they feel unprepared and like the players are not ready to play, that falls on him and on the coaching staff. He puts that on the coaches. That's a coaching thing, is to get the players up for the game, to get the players prepared for the game, and to get the players bought in for the game plan and for the game in general. He looks at that as a leadership issue, not as it's Mac Jones's fault that he was sluggish and played poorly for 2 quarters, or it's, these guys, the receiver's fault or the line's fault. No, that's the coach's job, is to lead the team. And so I think a lot of the things that they looked at from that standpoint, I think the frustration for Belichick was that he blamed himself. He felt like it was his fault that they were so flat and so unprepared to play Indianapolis early on in this game. The second thing was, that when you beat yourself, and a lot of the issues that came up in that game on Saturday night are fundamental core principles of the Belichick regime. clean on special teams, no penalties, no turnovers, no dumb plays, no shooting yourself in the foot. The Patriots have won so many games without their fastball, because they just have played a clean game from an operations standpoint. So those are the two things that hurt Bill the most. One, when his coaching staff and he doesn't prepare the team well enough to get out there and play a game, and two, when they break down on the fundamentals. When you're missing punts, blocks on the punt block team, when you're getting 8 penalties, and a bunch of those were key penalties. It wasn't just the volume; it was when they came up in the game. Right, you're third and goal from the 2, I should say, and Mike Onwenu jumps and gets called for a false start. That pushes them back to the 7-yard line. That's when they decided to kick that field goal with 9 minutes to go. So instead of third and goal from the 2, with Ramondre Stevenson behind Jakob Johnson and 6 offensive linemen on the field, you feel pretty good about them being able to battering ram themselves in the end zone from that distance. You go back to the 7-yard line, you stall out, you kick a field goal. Brandon King, a guy that they have solely on the roster to play special teams, jumps offside on a field goal and gives the Colts another shot after they missed the first one, and the kicker comes back and makes the second one, right? And so there's 3 points off the board for you. So you talk about the penalties and when they happened. They were just critical situational times in the game and special teams. When you pay all this money, I mentioned Brandon King, Matthew Slater, Cody Davis, Justin Bethel. All these guys are on the team just to play in the kicking game. That's their only responsibility. They get paid. Matthew Slater, who I think is a great all-time Patriot, it's going to go in the Patriots Hall of Fame, might actually be a Pro Football Hall of Famer if they start letting in special teams guys into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But when you're paying these guys real money against the salary cap, now it's not like he's making $20 million, but he's making a couple, right? And you're paying all these kicking game only guys all this money, and they're jumping offside, they're not punting, blocking on punts, they're not doing all the little things. That must just drive him crazy because that's why he invests in special teams. That's the argument. Is, well, we don't have punts blocked, and we cover kicks extremely well, and we have a great operation on field goals, and that just wasn't the case on Saturday night. So a poorly coached, a poor fundamental football game, and that drove Bill crazy. And I think the last thing that probably drove him a little bit up a wall is Frank Reich, to be honest, is a little bit of a thorn in his side. Right, he was the offensive coordinator, that Eagles team that upset the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Then he, ends the 7-game winning streak on Saturday night against Bill. So I think Frank Reich drives him crazy. I don't think he wants. I wouldn't put Bill in a room with Frank Reich anytime soon if there's no cameras around. Let me put it to you that way.
And this is what we said last week, that the Colts were going to be one of those 3 teams maybe that if the Patriots face in the postseason, those are going to be the obstacles. Those are going to be the teams.
Yeah.
And it was proven, even though, Carson Wentz in the passing game was nothing. It did nothing. So that did not have any impact on the game. It was just,
there are very few teams that can out-bully the bully, right? The Patriots are a bully on both sides of the ball. They want to play that style of play. In the AFC, it's probably Indy and Tennessee are the only teams that can go toe-to-toe with them truly in the trenches. So if you're going to beat the Patriots, it's one of two ways. You're either going to beat them at their own game, like Indianapolis did, or you're going to win a shootout. Those are the 2 ways that you can beat them. If you play them in that middle ground, or you let them dominate the line of scrimmage, then you're going to lose the football game. But a team like Kansas City, maybe or Buffalo, if they're hitting at all cylinders offensively, can get into the 30s. And I don't know if this Patriots offense is going to be able to score 30-plus points right now with the rookie quarterback. But if you play a trenches type of game, there are not very many teams in the AFC that are equipped to beat the Patriots like that. But Indianapolis is one of them.
Was somebody specifically? Did you target a specific individual or 2 on defense that a little bit disappointing that they didn't come through
for the Patriots? Look, I think there's a lot of conversations right now about Dante Hightower and his future with the team. He was the player in the hole on the 67-yard touchdown that missed the tackle on Jonathan Taylor. Now, to be fair to Hightower, he's not a lateral mover, and he's moving from left to right. Taylor's maybe might win MVP.
Sure.
Honestly, he's going to win Offensive Player of the Year, maybe, unless it's Cooper Kupp. And he makes a one cut and go type of run on a mid zone scheme and just hits the hole and he's gone. And I think with Hightower, he is at the point in his career where I do think it is fair to say that if he is not moving north and south, if he's not moving forward at the line of scrimmage and he asks him to move laterally in either direction, he is not the same player that he once was, a couple of years ago. Earlier this season, it was Jackson, the Chargers running back, that had that big run when they played Los Angeles. Same exact type of thing. They got Hightower out on the perimeter. He was, in the hole, ready to make the tackle, and he whiffs. This time around, it's Taylor whiffs in the hole again. So if there's one player that I thought, obviously Hightower didn't single-handedly cost them the game or anything like that, but I think that he has definitely felt his fair share of criticism all season based off of how he's moved on the field. He just doesn't move as well as he used to, and he has always been a plotter. He's always been a downhill thumping type of old school linebacker, 255, 260 pounds. But back in the day, he could at least move a little bit so that it wasn't quite as pronounced when he got isolated like that with some room to run for the running back. Now, with that type of play, there's really, he just has no chance at this point of his career.
And on the flip side, you got to feel good about the catch from N'Keal Harry, especially after what happened in the Buffalo game. It was like, it's, of course, got to be N'Keal Harry. Yeah. But the Patriots won the game, or else he would have been a GOAT once again. But for him to come up with that pass was very significant, and you just hope that can get him going.
Yeah, it was honestly that catch was one of my favorite plays of the year, and not just because N'Keal Harry finally made a big play in a big spot, but because of the way that they built up to that catch. So they actually ran the same play 3 times in the game, and they hit the front side levels concept twice in a row, one on a shorter pass to Jacoby Myers. Then they came back to the play again and hit the deeper dig to Kendrick Bourne. And then the third time that they ran it, the 2 safeties for the Colts saw the levels, which is, a short in cut and then a deeper in cut. And the 2 safeties saw it, so they came down and jumped the levels concept, thinking, oh, it's the same exact play. This time we're not going to get beat by it. And it gave N'Keal Harry a one-on-one on the outside with no inside help for the cornerback. And so you talk about sequencing together play calls if you're Josh McDaniels, and coming back to the same play but hitting it 3 different times. For an offensive coordinator, that's the jackpot, right? You got so excited that the same play worked 3 different ways is just a great sort of sequence of play and calling, and a great indication of the offensive coordinator's job to sequence those plays together. Then you have Mac's ability to read it out 3 different ways, right? And throw the ball to 3 different receivers, and make, on the last one to N'Keal, the aggressive decision to throw the one-on-one down the field. He sees the safeties jump up on the dig routes. He knows he's got one-on-one, and he just lays it out there to let his guy go ahead and make a play. So those are the types of throws that, even like in this game against Indianapolis, it was one time, right? It was one time that he hit a 40-plus yard play, but that's what the Patriots need. They need him once a game to take that chance down the field and give somebody an opportunity to get them a big play down the field, because the Patriots have been really good. They are number 1 in the league in producing passing plays of 20 to 30 yards. Right in that, like, we're going to throw the 18-yard dig, and then you're going to run it for 3 more yards, and it's technically a 20-plus yard play, right? But it's not. Then they are towards the bottom of the league and producing anything over 30 yards, right? They don't produce those truly explosive plays. They produce the explosive plays, which is fine.
Sure.
It's the type of offense that they play, and certainly it's worked for them. But to add in their bag, whether it's N'Keal Harry or it's Nelson Aguilar getting up the field or whoever it is, a deep shot every once in a while is just going to be really critical to opening the entire offense up. So that play was awesome. That was a really great indication of everybody understanding conceptually what the play design is trying to get done against a certain coverage and where his options were in terms of Mac against the coverage that was being called and the concept that was being called by McDaniels, and then making the aggressive throw and decision to push it down the field to N'Keal, and then a great catch. So more of that would be, I mean, obviously 43-yard plays is nice. So more of that is kind of an obvious statement, but I think that is the next iteration of this offense in general for Mac Jones is hitting some of those deeper throws down the field a little bit more consistently.
And then finally, the Patriots take on the Buffalo Bills for the last time, maybe, for 2021, maybe.
Yes.
And we'll see how that works as far as win, lose, because each week now, this jumbled playoff race in the AFC changes between like 10 teams. So who knows what's going to happen from week to week, but we'll talk more about that next week. And then the Patriots' next opponent is?
After that is the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So it's so what is it? It's Jacksonville.
Yes, Jacksonville, Miami.
Oh, that's right. It's already, we'll already get the last 2 games of the season. That's right. Wow.
Yeah, Miami in Miami, which is no
that's
cakewalk for the Patriots.
Especially last game of the season. What's at stake?
A lot of
So.
I believe there's some places like Denver comes to mind where the Patriots haven't played a ton of games at and have a bad or losing record in those stadiums, but they've played a ton of games down in Miami, and they've lost a lot of games to the Dolphins, games that you would think they had no business whatsoever losing, Brady era games that they clearly had the better team. And they go down there, and whether it's the heat that gets to them or it's just, I don't know, it's just a weird stadium. And this is not just a Belichick era thing either. The Patriots as a franchise, as an organization, have always stunk down in Miami, always. So it's when Belichick came here, I think it was in 2002 or 2003, they had a walk-off Troy Brown 80-yard touchdown in overtime to win the game down in Miami, which ended a losing streak of like 15 years or something crazy like that down in Miami at the time. They have just stunk down there for whatever reason. They just do not play well down in Miami. So everybody in New England is praying that Dolphins game means absolutely nothing, right? If that Dolphins game, if they have to win that game
to win the division,
to make the playoffs or win the division, then everybody up here is going to be on, sweating it out all week long. So if it's seeding, they'll lose and they'll go from this 2 seed to the 4 seed. If it's the division, they'll lose the division. I mean, it's not a place you want to have to care about that game against.
And Miami might need it themselves because they got the game that they have to.
Even when they don't, though, 2019, I think it was. Yeah, 19, week 17, 2019. The Patriots, if I was actually at home, the Patriots are at home for that game. If they beat Miami, they were going to be the number 1 seed in the conference. If they lost to Miami, they were going to be playing on wild card weekend. They ended up losing the game. They lose to the Titans in wild card weekend, and the rest is history. Yep. So the Miami is not the team you want to play the last week in the season. It's too bad they couldn't schedule the Jets.
I know.
Even the Bills. People I think would rather play the Bills.
Sure.
In that spot,
the last game.
Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it.
Yeah,
I do. So well, we'll see how it all unfolds. But again, next week it's Jacksonville. So
yes,
that should be a breeze of a show, I would think. But new head coach and all. So Jacksonville's playing the Jets this week. So that's a battle for the draft slotting.
Can't wait to watch that game on Tuesday.
I love it. I can't get enough of those Jet games every week. All right, so Ryan, appreciate it as always. Evan, appreciate it as always. Ryan, I want to thank him, by the way, for joining us.
Yeah.
And Ryan, of course, has been on this channel for a few years now. So we'll have, matter of fact, he's in our Dynasty League, and he made the playoffs in our Dynasty League. So
nice.
He's doing really well there. And we'll hook up with him again if the Patriots play the Bills in the postseason. But Evan, thanks as always. Your next show is Thursday this
week because of the holiday. But yeah, Thursday preview show, Patriots Bills preview show on Patriots Press Pass.
And then about a half hour after the game, you're back on the air to wrap up New England and Buffalo. 1 o'clock game?
Yeah. Well, thank God. Yes, so 1 o'clock game. No more primetime games. No more Saturday and Monday. It's been a weird couple of weeks. It's so it's good to get back on Sunday at 1 p.m. at home. Is as easy as it gets. So I'm happy about that.
Thanks, Evan. We'll talk to you next week.
No problem. Thanks, Greg.